What's up, Archons? I'm Flightless Pheasant, and now that you're here, we can put on our Sunday best and get ready to go to church. But before we do, I'm a huge fan of Keyforge, and if you are too, then please like, subscribe, and hit the bell, as I'll be bringing you even more lore from Keyforge and the Crucible. Today we're going to be doing another installment in my series called Houses of the Crucible, where I break down one of the houses that's part of the Keyforge lore. Each house is unique, but they all work together with Archons to collect amber, forge keys, open vaults, and loot the treasures inside. Each house is different, bringing with it its own unique design inspirations, membership requirements, hierarchy, ideals, technology, and uses for amber. And this series is about breaking it all down so that you too can appreciate the unique world that is the Crucible. Today we're going to be talking about the Church of the Opened Eye, which is a real mouthful and somehow gets shortened to Sanctum? But anyway, we're going to be talking about them. The design inspirations for House Sanctum draw heavily from medieval and Dark Age knights and churches, with lots of religious symbology throughout their various card arts, including cathedrals and halos and glowing wings, and even heavy armored knights on horseback. Mechanically, this translates to them being a house that's all about collecting amber as if it was relics, making them the house that most prominently uses the capture mechanic, symbolizing them taking amber and holding on to it to be brought back to reliquaries or churches where it can be sanctified. They also use heavy armor mechanic, and are one of the houses most likely to have creatures with armor 2 or greater in their ranks. The membership of House Sanctum is made up majoritarily of humans, but from what I can tell, this is just sort of incidentally the case and isn't actually intentional, as they do take in the occasional non-human member. Additionally, House Sanctum has a number of spirits, but according to the teachings of the Church of the Opened Eye, these spirits are just humans or other members of the house who've achieved a higher state of enlightenment, and through doing so were able to shed their physical form and become beings of pure energy. This normally means that in order for them to operate outside of the Sanctum Brightholds, they have to be inside of armor that keeps their physical form together, but there are certain individuals that are strong enough to even overcome that limitation. These ones being referred to as angels, who are beings of pure energy who can manifest themselves without any kind of container or vessel wherever they desire. Obviously, being an angel or spirit makes you superior to those who are not, but does not immediately mean that you're in a position of leadership. It just generally means that you're in charge of whatever group of faithful you find yourself in whenever you're traveling around missionarying or performing your functions within the Sanctum holds. The internal organization of House Sanctum is broadly broken up into 3 sections. The first is made up of the non-combatants who are part of the house. This is your bureaucrats, your missionaries, your doers of good works, who are typically sent out into the nations around any given Sanctum hold and are going to spread the good word of the Church of the Opened Eye. This group is pretty loosely organized, as most of its members don't really need a super rigid hierarchy, but even they do tend to answer to the higher members of the various other groups. The second group within House Sanctum are the Knights of the House of Sanctum. These knights go out on quests to try to destroy evil throughout the Crucible, as well as collecting amber to be brought back to be sanctified by the various churches and holds within House Sanctum's purview. The knights are always on a quest to destroy evil and do good works, and have a very rigid hierarchy where those who are of a more powerful or higher status will lead the crusades and those below them will follow behind. They also have a tendency to promote squires from among the local peasantry whenever they're traveling through an area, and having those squires come with them on their various works. The last group is the most mysterious. This group is referred to as the Order of the Grey, and they seem to be a monastic order that operates within House Sanctum but has an incredible level of autonomy and is allowed to operate independently from the other groups without much oversight. It's a little unclear what their exact purpose is, but it's implied that their job is to monitor the other members of House Sanctum and to make sure that no one deviates from the teachings of the Open Eye. How they go about this is kind of unclear, but because of their sort of ambiguous purpose, they are often called Grey Monks, and they operate somewhere between light and darkness. House Sanctum is led by an individual called Gizelhart the Zealot. Gizelhart, a giant female snake, is a prophet of sorts who can tell truths about the future, and has various mad ravings that are written down by the scribes of Sanctum, including things like pie is superior to cake, and if your opponent is thirsty, take away their straw. Sanctum is easily the most altruistic of all of the houses on the Crucible that we've so far been introduced to, as every member is constantly trying to do good works for the benefit of the entire Crucible. Unfortunately, that's a little unclear as to what benefits the whole Crucible, and their interpretation tends to be a touch on the heavy-handed side, as they tend to think of anyone who performs evil or unjust acts as being an enemy that has to be purged or destroyed. And they take this to a pretty heavy extreme, to the point where they have been known to guard vaults and judge Archons before allowing them access. The most extreme example of this was during the Dark Amber crisis of mass mutation, when a whole subsection of House Sanctum, known as the Red Shroud, went on a grand crusade to seal the Dark Amber Vault, a mission that was ultimately succeeded but cost thousands of lives, and ever since then they've stood guard over it, not even allowing Archons to come near to try to reopen it for fear of what could happen. As you can see, House Sanctum takes a pretty direct and heavy-handed approach with their issuance of justice, but they've never been ones to shrug off those in need, making them a great house to go to if you need help or have troubles, but a house you should be wary of if you operate in any sort of moral gray area. From a technological standpoint, it's actually a little hard to pin down just how advanced House Sanctum is or isn't. First of all, they do seem to have some level of anti-gravity technology, because most of their holds are on floating islands that can be moved around the Crucible. But if they do have a mastery of this technology, they don't use it for anything else, as they don't seem to use hovercraft or jetpacks or any other kind of anti-gravity tech. The most advanced technology they do seem to use on a regular basis is actually integrated into their armor, that allows them to contain the spirits that are a member of their house and keep them from dissipating when they're not within the holds. Additionally, there is some kind of technology used within the holds to allow the spirits to travel without that armor, but how this technology works and what it is again pretty unclear. Part of the problem with pinning down how advanced House Sanctum's technology is that they tend to eschew technology for any task that could be completed by manual labor, believing that performing acts of manual labor will bring them closer to enlightenment, and so if you are capable of doing something with your hands, you're encouraged to do so, making their need for technological development fairly minimal outside of combat. Speaking of combat, that's where most of their unique uses for amber come in. House Sanctum tends to integrate amber into their armor and weapons in order to cause them to glow with a bright golden energy that is somehow enhancing their senses and giving them extra force and damage. This energy can be shaped in a number of ways and is often made into halos or wings. It's also believed that amber is an integral part of the process to become a spirit and subsequently an angel, although the rituals or practices involved in doing this are very tightly guarded secrets. The only other significant use for amber that House Sanctum has is to collect and sanctify it, a process by which they give it a sort of holy glow. They then tend to redistribute this amber to other people across the Crucible as a way of sort of giving them wealth, and it's even said that Sanctum amber has a sort of holy or positive energy to it that other amber just doesn't have. House Sanctum has a largely positive relationship with most of the other houses on the Crucible, preferring to have positive interactions over being aggressors in most situations. However, there are a couple of exceptions to this. The most notable being that House Sanctum has declared the demons of House Dis to be enemies of the Church to be eradicated whenever possible. Thus, there have been multiple conflicts between House Dis and House Sanctum whenever the two find themselves in the same area at the same time. They're also not a huge fan of House Shadows, and generally believe that the thieves of House Shadows should be brought to justice whenever possible. There is one relationship that's surprisingly positive that you might not expect, and that's between House Sanctum and House Unfathomable. Both houses have a strong reverence for amber and believe that it holds religious significance, and because of this, they tend to overlap a lot in their beliefs regarding amber, which has led to shockingly positive relations between the two houses that normally seem like they shouldn't be compatible. House Sanctum is another one of those houses that's very near and dear to my heart. I really enjoy the way that this house personifies the knightly orders of justice and good, while also being a little tongue-in-cheek about it throughout the process. I also like that the lore of House Sanctum has sort of evolved over time. I know that we recently got the introduction of House Redemption, and I didn't mention them here because they deserve their own video when the time comes, but know that I am thinking about that. House Sanctum was a very fun one to go over, and I really hope that you learned a little bit more from this video. Come along with me next time as we explore one of the most ancient societies on the Crucible, and spend a little time with some ancient Roman dinosaurs in their republic on the Crucible. Until then, I'm Flightless Pheasant, and this has been Houses of the Crucible. Later, Archons.